6 weeks in, we are on our final stretch of our course, My God. Hope you've been enjoying it as much as I have. And we've saved the best for last, maybe the most important for last, the most popular for last. So let's do like this. Lesson 6 today is titled Our Relationship. We have 4 final questions and 4 very important questions and 4 very meaningful questions. You ready? Number 1, why can't we see God? Number 2, can we reconcile God with science? Number 3, why is Judaism so obsessed with idolatry? Is God jealous? And number 4, I am a spiritual person. Why do I need to follow the Torah's system to have a relationship with God? 4 final questions, very meaningful questions and very pressing questions to the modern mind. So let us begin our journey for tonight with question number 1. Why can't we see God? It's a very straightforward question. God wants us to believe in him. The world says seeing is believing. So it would only make sense that if God wants us to believe in him, what should he do? Show up. That's it. Simple as that. Just show up. If we get to see God, then probably, right? Presumably, we'll all be in good shape. We won't have any doubts. We won't even have to believe in him. We'll know that he exists. Everything will fall into place. So that's going to be our opening question. Why can't we see God? What's his business that we're supposed to believe in God, but we don't actually get to see him? So what I want to do tonight is I want to give you 2 answers. First is the elementary answer. And the elementary answer is not just an elementary answer, it's a very important answer. It's an important premise. And then we could go a little bit deeper, delve a little bit deeper. And I want to begin like this. What do you think the experience of seeing God would look like? Let's put it that way. If you would see God, what do you think you would see? So you have to visualize in your imagination.
Everything we see is created by God, so we see God in that way.
You see God right now?
Well, you see everything that he's created.
Right, but you don't see him. At least I don't see him. Maybe you do.
I mean, if it's a him or it's a thought or it's just.
Well, what would it look like? If you would see God, what would it look like? What would that experience look like? What do you say? Anybody? You see, it's a confusing thing. It's a problem because what could you see? The eye can't see everything. The eye could see things that are physical, and the eye could see things that are 3-dimensional. Like, last week we did the exercise of trying to imagine an infinite table. And what happened? The moment you realize what a truly infinite table is, you realize you have nothing for your imagination to think about. So trying to think about an infinite God that totally transcends any type of physical form or physical limitation or physical manifestation, you're kind of stuck with nothing to see. So the simple answer is, you want to see God, there's nothing to see. It's beyond the realm of sight. And this is what we say. Take a look at text 1. Let's begin with our first text for tonight. This is from Maimonides, our beloved Maimonides. We love quoting Maimonides. Maimonides, the Rambam, one of the great things that he did as a great scholar and philosopher is Maimonides distilled all of Jewish beliefs into the top 13. What are the top 13 beliefs in Judaism? Which means we Jews have hundreds of beliefs, thousands of beliefs, right? What do we believe? We believe there's no medicine as good as chicken soup. That's a Jewish belief. Now we have tons of beliefs, but Maimonides chooses 13 and says, these are the foundations of Judaism. And this is fundamental number 3. Would you like to read? Text 1, page 173. You want to give us a read?
Sure.
There you go.
We believe.
The third principle. You see.
The third principle is the negation of God, possessing corporality. We believe that the one God to whom we speak is neither body nor bodily faculty. all activity that transpires with the body, such as motion, rest, or lodging, does not relate to him, neither in his essence nor in his doings.
There you have it. There's nothing physical about God, and therefore, it is only logical to say that there's no such idea as seeing God. You can't see your feelings. You can't see your feelings. You can't see your thoughts. You can't see a mathematical theory. You can't see sound. Why? Because these are beyond something physically tangible. These are not three-dimensional things. They exist, but they're not three-dimensional. You don't get to see them. So the simple, basic, elementary answer is you can't see God because there's nothing to see about God. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Your feelings are not feelings. Your thoughts are not thoughts because you can't see them. It exists, but not in a form that your eye could perceive them. Simple as that. Let's put that up over here. What would it look like to see God? Maimonides says that God does not have any corporeal reality. That's a key belief. And therefore, the notion of seeing God is totally nonsensical. That's what we're saying over here. Okay. Not only that, but if you would actually see something when we say seeing God, it would be a total turnoff. Let's put it this way. This is a great, I love this text. Text 2, page 174. Text 2 is written by a very interesting fellow, Dr. Irv Block. He was a professor. He was a professor in the University in Ontario. Just passed away a few years ago. Very interesting fellow. He was a brilliant Harvard graduate. And his major field of study was philosophy. And he, in his years in college, got close to Chabad and became a Baal Teshuvah. He was one of the very first, like in the 60s, there was the Baal Teshuvah movement. He was really he was like the first, he was a trailblazer of the Baal Teshuvah movement. Late 50s, he embraced Yiddishkeit. Very interesting fellow, very interesting story. And it's actually interesting. He at one time decided that that's it. He's quitting college. He was in Harvard, and he is going to yeshiva. And he went to the Rebbe, and he was sure that, he didn't even go to the Rebbe. He went to the Chabad yeshiva in 770, sat down on a bench and started learning. A little while later, like a little bit later on in the day, somebody taps him on the shoulder and says, the Rebbe wants to speak to you. So he goes into the Rebbe's office. So the Rebbe says, what are you doing here? He says, I came to Taiwan. That's it. I quitted college. I'm going to yeshiva. So the Rebbe said, pack your bags, get back on the bus, go right back to Boston. Go right back to Harvard. He says, but I want to go to yeshiva. And the Rebbe said that once you start at college, that means that God wants you there. And don't leave college until you graduate. Make sure to get good marks. And you'll be of service to God much better as a college graduate of Harvard than a yeshiva boy. So he very begrudgingly went back. He majored in philosophy, and then the Rebbe told him to write a book contrasting Jewish belief with Aristotle, with the Aristotelian beliefs. See, he never actually published his book. He was in the middle of publishing it. But he wrote this book called God, Rationality, and Mysticism. Very, very deep read. And in fact, I don't know if any of you bumped into them. My brother-in-law, Mendel Shem Tov, he got married to a Shana Block. If any of you are involved with the friendship circle, Shana Block is his granddaughter. So Irv Block was a very, very, very colorful figure. Quite an exceptional guy. So he writes this, such a fun text to read. So you want to read it? There we go. Text 2, page 174.
There are some philosophers, such as N.R. Hansen, who argue that as a matter of fact, there is at present no such evidence for God, but there might be at some point in the future. What would such evidence look like? Hansen describes it for us. The heavens open, the clouds pull apart, revealing an unbelievably immense and radiant Zeus-like figure towering up above us like 100 Everests. He frowns darkly as lightning plays across the features of his Michelangeloid face. He then points down at me and exclaims, for every man, woman, and child to hear, I have had quite enough of your too clever logic chopping and word watching in matters of theology. Be assured, N.R. Hansen, that I most certainly exist. The first question one has to ask is, if it is God himself, this would deny the basic thesis of monotheism, that God is not a finite figure that has a visible form. No one raised in this tradition of the Bible would ever suppose that a Zeus-like figure could be a manifestation of God, much less God himself. An ancient Greek might, but Hansen was not addressing himself to an audience of ancient Greeks. He was speaking to modern man, and this man, be he atheist, be he theist or atheist, if he looked up in the sky and saw Hansen's Zeus-like figure, would first of all be frightened out of his wits. Secondly, he might think Earth was being invaded by outer space creatures. If this figure proclaimed that he was God, only an imbecile would believe it. Probably the last thing one would think is that this is a manifestation of God.
All right, so this text brings out the absurdity or the absurdness of even entertaining the thought that there's going to be a godlike figure that one day you could see, and that, oh, that's going to convince you that there's a God. No, if anything, he says you'd be scared out of your wits. You'd probably, I'm saying the last thing you would think is that this is a God. We all understand that God is going to be something beyond just a massive form, a Zeus-like figure, right? It's a good text. I don't know who this N.R. Hansen is. I looked him up. He was a recent philosopher, relatively recent times. It's a bit of a foolish thing to say this, no? To imagine that this is what you would see if God would show up to you. All right, but anyways, here we have it. We have a very basic conclusion. Why can't you see God? Because there's nothing to see. Nothing to see. Okay. So if that's what it was, that simply God is beyond the ability to be seen, and there's nothing to see, and therefore God is beyond being able to be seen. Okay, then okay. I guess we could, not a very inspiring answer. It's a very technical answer, but okay, maybe this is the answer. The only problem is it's not so simple. Not so simple at all. Why not? Because in Judaism, we speak a lot about people seeing God. It's a big part of Jewish belief. And most importantly, when the Jews came out of Egypt and they crossed the sea, the Torah says they saw God. They were able to point with their fingers and say, this is my God. Our sages tell us that what a small child and what the maidservants saw when they crossed the Red Sea, even the greatest prophets never saw. They saw God. Whatever that looks like, I don't know what it looks like, but whatever it looks like, whatever the experience is, they had the idea of seeing God. Whatever seeing means, they had it. And then a few weeks later, the Jews stood, 3 million, approximately 3 million people, stood at Mount Sinai. And again, the Torah says it so many times. They witnessed God. They saw God. They didn't have to hear about it. They saw God. They were able to give testimony. Eyewitnesses, 3 million eyewitnesses to God. Let's just take a quick look at this. No, okay, it's okay. We don't need to. So, if there is such a concept called seeing God, number one, we need to understand, then what does that mean? What does it mean to see God? Did they see a Zeus-like figure? Like N.R. Hansen speaks about? Probably not. There's probably something a little bit more sophisticated than that. What did they see? That's a very good question. In fact, if any of you have taken our Secrets of the Bible course that we did like 2 years ago, remember that? I think you were there, Marion. We had a whole class about this, the idea of what does it mean that the Jews saw God at Mount Sinai. But more importantly, here we do see that there is something called seeing God. I got to close my ringer. That's what happens. So if there is something called seeing God, then why don't we get to see God? Right back at square one. There definitely is something called seeing God. It's definitely something which we have to be a little bit nuanced about. But there is something called that. So why don't we get to see God? Right back at square one. So let me ask you a question. In the Jewish tradition, there's a cultural phenomenon in Jewish tradition that you answer a question with another question. Right? You know what I'm talking about? A Jew answers one question with another question. The Jew can't just be straight. It's a true story. My great-grandfather, he once had to give testimony in a courtroom. He was somewhat acquainted with a certain case, and he had to give testimony. But he was very scared to. He didn't want to say the wrong thing and get people in trouble. He was a real Russian Jew. He lived in Brooklyn, but he had that real He was a tough guy, my great-grandfather. So he decided that in the courtroom, any question the judge asks him, or that in the cross-examination, he's just going to respond with another question. So I actually saw the how do you call it? The transcript of the courtroom. What's it called? It's not called transcript. There's a more professional word for it. Okay, in any case, I actually read this. It's a few pages. And the judge or the lawyer says, okay, was there a meeting on this day about this topic? And my great-grandfather said, well, what's a meeting? What's a meeting? If two people meet in the street and start talking, is that a meeting? Did it have to be scheduled in advance? Did there have to be notes? Did it have to, what exactly is the criteria of a meeting? And what does it mean that we spoke about it? They asked him, do you know about this? He said, what does it mean knowing about it? How well do I have to know about it in order for it to be called known? He says, I need to know. I can't answer the question unless you just tell me exactly the criteria. He drove everybody meshuggah. And finally, the judge just screamed out at him. He says, why are you answering every question with another question? So you know what he said? Why not? So he was ushered right off the dais, and that's how he got out of asking questions, answering any questions. So anyways, I want to ask a question in response to this question. We are asking, why can't we see God? I'm going to ask you, why do you want to see God? Why do you want to see God? Why would anybody want to see God? Maybe you'll say, I actually couldn't care less. Come to think of it, I couldn't care less. But if you do care, why would you want to see God? Feel free to answer. Unmute on Zoom if you would like.
It would
Yes.
be awe-inspiring.
Joel wants to be inspired. Why do you want to be inspired?
It would give credence to my beliefs.
Oh, it would confirm, it would give strength to your beliefs. If all you have about God is your beliefs, 1 second, Gail, if all you have are your beliefs, believing is believing. If I get to see it, then I'll be able to confirm my relationship with God will be so much better, will be so much more enhanced. No, that's the thinking. What do you say, Gail?
I think it would, for me, it would take away, I don't know, I think when you see somebody or whatever, there's that critical part of people that would start tearing, oh, well, he's not so great, or he, whatever. I would not want to see God.
Gail does not want to see God. All right. Yeah, that's a fair opinion. Anyone else? Why would you want to see God? Supposing you want to see God. Or why would anybody want to see God? So the answer is, I think most people would say, is what Dr. Lieb said. The reason why some people want to see God is simply because it would make my relationship with him so much more real. If God was real, if I was able to see God and confirm God in the way that I confirm my real life, like my breakfast in the morning, right? I know I'm hungry. I see the food looks good. I could eat it. It's a real thing. If God could be real, I'd probably be a much better Jew. Or so goes the logic. So goes the thought. And a lot of people say this, oh, you know why I don't believe? You know why I'm not religious? Let God show up. If God shows up and I see him, then I'll believe. What, I'm supposed to believe in him without seeing him? I'm supposed to just jump in with belief, with blind faith. A lot of people say that. I don't mind being religious. God has to make the first move. Show up. So this is the thinking. If I saw God, then okay, then it would be real. If not, then it's weak. My faith is weak. So let's talk a little bit about it. And I want to share with you like this. That the truth is that seeing God, we think that we would be better believers. And we would have better buy-in to Judaism if we could see God. The real truth is that as inspiring and uplifting as seeing God would be theoretically, whatever it looks like, it wouldn't make that much of a difference to us. That's the real truth. It really wouldn't make that much of a difference to us. Seeing is a big deal, not that big of a deal. I'll tell you why. Well, let's go back to the story of the giving of the Torah. God gives the Torah to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, and he literally reveals himself to the Jews, exposes himself. Here I am. Absolute revelation of God. Jews saw God. And in fact, our sages tell us that every single time the Jews heard God speaking, they immediately fainted. They all died. Literally, 3 million people died on the spot. It was such an overwhelming experience. Talking about being awestruck. It was so awe-inspiring and perhaps frightening and rattling that just everybody died on the spot, and God had to revive them. And then he tried showing up again and speaking again, and they all died again. That's what happened. So you would imagine if you see God to that type of degree, where it's so real, it's the ultimate reality. You hear God, you see God speaking to you personally. You would think it should be a life-changing moment. It should. That should be something that should totally change who you are, change the way you think. But let's look at the story. 40 days later, not 40 weeks, not 40 years, 40 days. No time at all. The Jews go and violate commandment number 2 and number 1. And they go and they make a golden calf and they serve the golden calf. And there we have the whole story of the broken tablets. And if you think about it, it boggles the mind. What an outstanding failure. A colossal failure. What did God do wrong? What didn't he do well enough to impress upon the Jews that, this is real? I'm here. I'm your God. There's no other gods. Did God not do something enough that the Jews should actually take that seriously? 40 days later, they're already jumping around serving golden calves. We're not talking about a small little breach. This is the biggest breach. How did that happen? If you think about it, it makes no sense. But this is really what it's all about. This is the essence of the point. Anytime that we experience as humans, let's call them a magical moment or miraculous moment, a moment in time that somehow totally shakes us, it totally moves us, an inspiring moment, a magical moment. The way it works is this is human psychology, and in the world of Hasidic teachings, this is a big, big idea. Inspiration is easy come and easy go. Being inspired is very, very cheap. It's very powerful. It can be very, very powerful in the moment. It never lasts. It never lasts. We've all had those magical moments. Maybe it was a religious magical moment, a miraculous moment. Maybe you went to Israel, you were by the Kotel. I've heard from people before. I've never felt spirituality till I stood by the Kotel. I really felt it. Many people will feel a stir of emotion, a desire to be better, shaken out of their complacency. Their horizons have been expanded in a certain inspirational moment. The moment you hold your child for the first time, it's awe-inspiring. It totally overwhelms you. And you have this gushing feeling of love, and I'll never let down this child. And when you stand under the chuppah, under the wedding canopy, you'll feel the exact same thing. Such an overwhelming feeling. I'm entering into a marriage. I'm always going to be devoted. I'm going to be the best husband. I'll be the best wife. It's good in the moment, but we all know it doesn't always last. Why doesn't it always last? Most people will come back from Israel very inspired. Check back in a month. Check back in 40 days. How much of that inspiration is still there? Chances are it wore off. So why is that? Inspiration really doesn't last. And the answer is, let's think about it. You are who you are. I am who I am. An inspiring moment is an imposition upon who you are. It's not you. You're not inspired. Something is inspiring you. Something is compelling you, is forcing you to be inspired. It's really not something, it's really you're being forced into a situation. When you were standing by Mount Sinai and God shows up and you feel this overwhelming connection with God, and you feel the overwhelming reality of God. You were just forced into that sense, into that feeling. And therefore, it doesn't last because it didn't change you. You had an experience. It doesn't last. Like, one of the things when you go on these tourist attractions, to these national parks, you go to the Grand Canyon, so they always have a souvenir shop where they could rip you off, sell you a keychain for $15. Okay, some people buy it, I guess. So, if you like having a magnet that says NYC, they want to buy it for $25, be my guest. Supporting the great city of New York City. Okay. So one of the things that they sell there, this is pretty common in many of these souvenir shops, is a t-shirt that says, I went to the Grand Canyon and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. I went to NYC and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. It's a deep message. That's actually a deep message. You go on a vacation. It's very exciting. It's very beautiful. But at the end, what are you left with? All I got is a lousy t-shirt. For something to be real, for something to be lasting, inspiration is never going to change you. Something that happens to you and forces you to be inspired is never going to be long lasting. It's going to wear away. And then in a moment of weakness, in a moment of struggle, in a moment of difficulty, it's not going to be there when you need it anymore. The change has to be coming from you. If God forces you to change, it's not transformative. It's just getting you to fall into compliance. And how long does that last for? A kid, you could get a kid to behave in a classroom for a week, for 2 weeks. I don't like school. Just sit down and behave. I'll give you candy. I'll give you rewards. Compliance you could get, but compliance doesn't last. Compliance is not going to work to get a kid to make their way all through school and college and succeed and to have willpower and ambition. For that, it needs to come from inside. God showing up is God imposing upon us compliance, not transformation. Transformation has to come from within. So here's a story. There's once a philosopher walking down the street of Manhattan, and he goes to the hot dog stand. So the hot dog vendor says, what would you like? So the philosopher says, make me one with everything. You understand? Make me one with everything. Very deep line. Make me one with everything. Okay. Follow along, everybody. It's a deep conversation going on over here. The hot dog vendor says it's going to be $2. The philosopher pulls out a 5. He says, give me change. The hot dog vendor says, change must come from within. Change must come from within. This is the essential idea over here. It is very, very nice to have God show up and force us to see him and to believe in him and to be inspired by him. It's not what's going to work. I want to put that up over here. A relationship that is initiated by God. If God is the one who's showing up and saying, here I am, you have no choice, you're a Jew, I'm your God, now you got to start doing what you got to do. The first thing is, it will simply compel us to conform. It's forcing us. It's giving us no choice. It would get compliance, not transformation. If God wants compliance, he could get it very easily. But if God wants us to be invested, if God wants us to be real, it has to come from us. And by the way, this is how our sages describe the giving of the Torah. When God gave us the Torah, our sages say that God held the mountain over the Jewish people and forced them to accept the Torah. Everybody wonders, what does that mean? God forced the Jews? And the answer is yeah, God overwhelmed the Jews to the point that they didn't even have a choice. They happily did it, but it was compliance. And therefore, if it's just the compelling, it's never going to last. I think I mentioned this idea a little bit 2 weeks ago. Perhaps this also explains a little of the problem today with marriages. Today, young people what's the word that we use? I fell in love. I fell in love. Now I want to get married to him, to her. No, falling in love. What a casual way of describing being invested in a relationship. Like I tripped into this. I fell into this. I don't even know what happened. I fell into love. It could be it's real. You fall into love. It's very possible. Falling into love is like a magical moment. It's like inspiring. So what happens when you fall out of love? Maybe today the disillusionment or the delusion is thinking that falling in love is enough. No. You got to make that love. Falling in love is simply compliance, is being forced into an inspirational moment. Real commitment is something that has to be created. So therefore, getting back to our question over here, you know why God doesn't show up and show himself to us and make himself a reality? Because if God did that, God could get perfect compliance. If you understood that being in a relationship with God, if you saw how badly you need a mitzvah, the same way you don't miss breakfast. If you miss breakfast, you feel it. You feel those hunger pangs. You would never miss a day of going to shul. You would never miss a day of putting on tefillin. It would be impossible. It's a reality. I don't eat my meals. Nobody forgets to go to sleep one night. You know, I forgot. What should I do? I forgot to go to sleep. Nobody does that. Some people forget to come to class. Oh, tonight's Wednesday night with the class. Oh, I forgot. Not you. You're all here. But some people do forget. That's not good. That's not what God wants. It's not real. It's not long lasting. It's not personal. God wants it to be real. God wants us to be invested. God wants us to be a real relationship. And therefore, God strategically hides himself a little bit for us to find him. And when we find him, that's real. And when we find him, that's the goal of life, to search for God, to bring God into our lives, to make God something that's a reality in our lives and the world. And we all believe as Jews that the exact same way the Jewish people and the world witnessed God by the giving of the Torah, that's going to happen again. We believe in the Messianic era, in a time of redemption, when Mashiach is going to come. And the number one prophecy, if you look in the prophets, in the book of Isaiah, where you mainly have all the prophecies about the coming of Mashiach, the number one prophecy is, we're going to see God. The flesh of eye, the eye of flesh, all people are going to see God. It's going to be a reality. It's our job to look for God. And this is really something which, like maybe more on a personal level, on an emotional level, captures the aspirations and the hopes and the dreams of the Jewish people throughout the ages. I want to get close to God. I want to see God. I want to feel that I have a personal relationship with God. And especially our sages tell us that there's an idea that we live in a time of concealment. In the temple times, seeing God was a lot easier. Feeling a personal relationship with God was a lot easier. Now we live in a time of what's called concealment. It's a lot harder. And Jews would always pray. It's part of our daily prayers. We want to see you again. There's the idea, don't hide from me. We want to feel the presence and the light and the energy, the personal relationship with God. So with that, I want to share with you a little video, a little song, something meaningful, something personal. And then with this, we're going to conclude the segment. So here's a little song. Sit back and enjoy. Enjoy our little segment over here.
I will say to the Rebbeinu Shalom, Father dear, don't hide from me. that you are truly there everywhere. Still in all I cannot see you, don't hide from me. It's been so long since last I saw you smile. Oh, oh, Don't hide from me. Where's the promise you will take my hand? Understand, my life is not complete without you. Don't hide from me. I need to see you more than ever now. 2,000 years is a million years too long to search for the light that I have never known. Show me your face, I need your embrace. Won't you please come out of your hiding place? Take me on your wing, teach me how to sing the one song the world wants to hear. Father dear, don't hide from me. Where is the promise you will take my hand? Understand, my life is not complete without you. Oh, don't hide from me. I need to see you more than ever now. 2,000 years is a million years too long to search for the light that I have never known. Show me your face, oh, I need your embrace. Won't you please come out of your hiding place? Take me on your wing, teach me how to sing the one song the world wants to hear. Don't hide from me, though I know that you are truly there everywhere. Still in all, I cannot see you. Don't hide from me. I need to see you more than ever now. So Father, don't cry. I love you too much to see you in pain. And only you who created tears can wipe them away forever. So bring on the day when there'll be only joy. You and I will smile. Oh, bring on the day when there'll be no more tears. We'll never cry again. Sing on, friends. So Father, don't cry. I love you too much to see you in pain. And only you who created tears can wipe them away forever and ever. Bring on the day when there'll be only joy. You and I will smile. So bring on the day when there'll be no more tears. We'll never cry again. Keep climbing, don't let nothing stand in your way. And keep believing, pay no attention to what they say. Up is where you wanna go. Oh, it's dark and lonely, lonely down below. So keep fighting, takes. Now don't forget, up is where you belong. It's where your soul will find her song. Don't hide from me. Don't hide from me, no, no. Thank you so much.
All right. It's a powerful song. All right, he added in some other little songs towards it at the end. But this captures like a Jewish attitude of the desire to want to see God, the desire to want to be closer to God, that God should be more of a reality in our life. It's the struggle of the soul, the homesickness of the soul, if you may. Right? Don't hide from me. Where are you? Right? You used to be around. Why can't I see you anymore? Okay. With that, dear friends, let us move right along. Moving right along, let's recap. Why can't we see God? The simple answer is, to put it brief, God can't be seen because he wants us to find him. Okay. Question number 2. Ooh, here we go. Can we reconcile God with science? It's good that we saved this for the end, no? So here's a story. There's once a rabbi. He was a pulpit rabbi, and pulpit rabbis give speeches every Shabbos day, every Saturday, from the pulpit in their synagogue. So this rabbi is he's making his way up to the dais, and already there's a guy in the front row. His name is Jack. Jack already falls asleep. He's already snoring. The rabbi didn't. So the rabbi turns to, he says, Jack, I didn't even start speaking yet. You're already sleeping? So Jack, with his eyes closed, he says, Rabbi, I trust you. I trust you. You know, as a rabbi, when we speak about religion and science, God and science, and the perceived conflicts and tension that there seems to be there, I'm on a bad footing, right? Rabbi, I trust you. You'll do what rabbis always do. Like, what do you expect? Of course, a rabbi is gonna, say whatever talking points rabbis have to say. Could you take a rabbi seriously in a actually critically intelligent way to try to get some wisdom on religion versus science, or is a rabbi just simply too biased? All right, so it's important for me to know, to be self-aware that I'm standing a little bit on weak footing when it comes to the conversation of science and religion, science and God. But it's an important topic, and it's really it's a massive topic. It deserves a full course, really, and we have done before. Some of you have been there, most of you not, but we have done a few years ago. We've done a few years ago a course titled "Wrestling with Faith." And we had their class, which was an over 2-hour class. We went really overtime. I warned everybody in advance that tonight's class is not going to be the regular hour and a half. And we did very in-depth religion versus science. So we're not going to be able to go in depth today. Although if you want, I can send you the recording of that class if you're interested. But I at least want to give you a few basic pointers, a few important, but basic. For now, we'll have to suffice with basic of God and science. Let's keep it to that. Let's not keep it to religion and science. Let's keep it to God and science. And let's not even get into the nitty gritty. Of course, we can speak about evolution. We can speak about age of the universe. We can speak about all types of stuff. But that's already getting into details. Let's first at least get basic, general, healthy attitudes to try to see where science and religion fit in. There was a great scientist who later on in his adult life, very adult life, embraced Judaism. What we would call he became religious. And I've spoken about him before. His name was Professor Velvel Green. I'm going to show you a little video clip from him soon. Velvel Green. I showed you a little video about him in the second class. So he was a NASA scientist. He was really cutting edge in the 60s, the 70s. And he became religious in the 60s. And people would always ask him, the 60s especially, this was the age of the science versus religion debate. People would always ask him, you're a scientist. What do you think about religion and science? He had a line, and it's a very deep line. He says, bad science and bad religion never go well together. Good science and good religion go perfect. Now, what does that mean? What's bad science? What's bad religion? What's good science and what's good religion? I don't know. You had to ask a scientist. But he was somebody who really thought through these matters. He was a bright man, Belleville Green. Let's try to take it seriously. There's somebody who told me, he says, Rabbi, you have nothing to offer. You have nothing to, this is one of the times that made me a little bit self-aware about my position as a rabbi, trying to talk about science and religion. He says, Rabbi, you have nothing to offer to me in the conversation of religion and science. For you, it's all dogma. It's all dogma. For me, it's evidence. It's reality. I'm evidence-based. You're just all dogma. So let's try to get past that, I hope. And let's really try to have a little conversation, a little bit of a healthy perspective. What's the place of science? What's the place of religion? Or in another way, or God and science, right? Let's keep the word religion out of it for now. Let's limit the scope of this. Or in other words, let's think about it this way. Could a religious believing Jew seriously engage in science? Is it compatible? Is it like just cognitively, does that work? Or the flip side, could a real scientist seriously engage with Jewish belief in a serious way? So I'll tell you, there are some Jews who are scientists, whether they're doctors or they're professors, and they're really bothered about this problem. And many Jews will say, you know what? I believe in science. Religion has no contribution to truth, but I love religion. I go to shul on Shabbos, good culture, good meaning, good value. I don't mind that, but it's not truth. So that's an example of like bad religion or bad science. The moment you start trying to compromise one, or you just make it into you don't take it seriously. But Professor Green says good religion, good science really do work well, which means it's all about having a proper attitude and having a healthy way of thinking about these things. So I want to speak today. We're going to talk about God and science. I basically want to kind of boil down today's questions to two questions, which are very basic questions from the intelligent, modern day person's perspective. Perspective number one is, do we even still need God? God, it used to be a very important thing. You needed God because back then, no one knew anything. No one knew any truth. So your whole truth, your whole understanding of anything, your entire system was God-based. Today we have science. Today we understand so much. We have such a deep understanding of the universe that we live in. Do we even still need God to fill that need of any form of understanding, of intelligence, of just simple context of who we are, what we're doing? Today it seems science has replaced that. So do we even still need God? That's the first question. Question number two is, where is the evidence for God? Right? We're evidence-based. We're science-based. Is God provable in a lab? Let's speak about that right now. Let's start with the first question. Do we need God today in a world of science? With so much scientific knowledge and data, and science is moving our world forward in so many good ways. What are we lacking? Why is God necessary? And there's a very simple answer, but it's such an important answer. People, I feel, don't appreciate this enough today, which is science tells us a lot. But even perfect science doesn't tell you everything. What is science? Science is the exploration of our universe, the laws of nature. What is? And we understand our nature, we understand how it functions. We can explain things, cause and effect. But science does not and cannot answer why. It tells us what, it doesn't tell us why. And that is something that even from the perspective of science, even the greatest scientist doesn't have these answers. And it's not saying there's something wrong with science. It's not just science simply doesn't provide that service. Scientific tools can never explain the why. Let's read this next text. We're going to text 7. Text 7 from the great Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, right? Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the late chief rabbi of the United Kingdom. Wonderful, wonderful individual. So let's read text 7. Pam, are we up to you? Okay, text 7, page 182. No, 1 second. Text 7.
There is absolutely nothing in science, not in cosmology or evolutionary biology or neuroscience, to suggest that the universe is breadth of meaning, nor could there be, since the search for meaning has nothing to do with science and everything to do with religion. Imagine what it would take to explain to someone who had no concept of money what is involved in withdrawing cash from a dispensing machine. He might watch the process 1,000 times, understand precisely physical properties of the credit card and the dispensing machine, but still had no idea what had taken place. Planning the transaction might include a history of the division of labor, exchange, barter, the origins of precious metals as currency, the shift from real to nominal value represented by a banknote, what a banknote is, what deposits, withdrawals, and credit are, and so forth. There is an internal logic of the system, the laws of banking, but the meaning of the system lies elsewhere, and it can only be understood through some sense of wider human context in which it is set. The internal workings of the system do not explain the place the system holds in human lives. The meaning of the system lies outside the system. Therefore, the meaning of the universe lies outside the universe. The same is true for science, whose subject is interrelationship of things within the natural world. Nature is sublimely indifferent to who we are and what we observe. There's nothing moral about it. It carries no meaning within it. Science tells us how the parts are related. It cannot tell us what the totality means.
It's a very important text. It's a blind spot that many people in the modern age don't realize, but it's quite evident once you realize it. Science can tell you everything about the world, but it cannot explain anything which goes into the realm of the why. It cannot give you purpose. It cannot give you morality. It cannot give you good judgment. It can't explain why anything is what it is. Okay, so you could have a theory of how things evolved. You could have a theory, and you could even understand scientifically how you came to be. But why are you here? What's your purpose here? What should you be doing once you're here? Science has no answers to that, because it's beyond the realm of the study of the physical universe and the laws of nature. And that's where God comes in. Even the greatest scientist is lacking something that only God or only religion could provide. And that's simply it's a very elementary point, but it's the most important point. I think it's a very important starting point. There's never not a need for God. Science without God could look pretty ugly, which is what we've seen in recent times. But that was the Holocaust. One of the greatest lessons of the Holocaust is how dangerous wisdom is without a good context, without purpose. The greatest atrocities, murdering millions of people, all in the name of science. Because you have good knowledge, but you don't know what to make of it. there's no purpose, there's no context that binds it all together and gives it meaning, then what are you left with?
Although we still don't know what to make of it, even with the belief in God.
No, that's not, well, listen, yes and no, but at least we have purpose, we have direction, we know what we need to be doing. And then everything that and that, even for science, it's not true. Science is a very important place in Judaism. And this is the next point that I want to get to. People ask, sorry.
Jeff?
Yeah, so did you want to say something more?
No.
No, okay. And let me now get to the next question, which is, where's the evidence for God? So first thing is, we said, do we need God? So we quoted Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. The meaning of the system lies outside the system. And we simply said that science can only explain what is. Science never explains why it is. And that's the contribution of God, even to the scientific mind. People ask, where's the evidence for God? You know, people who are absolutists when it comes to science, refuse to accept God. Because if I can't test God in a lab, if I can't define God in a lab, it's not real. That's why Hawkins didn't believe in God. He says, either you bring it to me in a lab and I can prove it, or it's not real in my universe. And what we have to understand from the perspective of Judaism is like this. God is the creator of nature. All the laws of nature is God's creation. God created time, God created space, God created the laws of logic, God created the laws of nature. When we study nature, we are understanding God's world. From a religious perspective, science is actually very, very meaningful. Science is the study of God's world. One of the ways of getting to know God and gaining an appreciation of God is by studying God's world. It's awe-inspiring. How did Abraham find God? Through observing the world. He was the first curious mind to start asking questions. What's the ultimate power? What's the ultimate cause to all these effects? Science leads one to God. But to bind God by that system and say God has to be provable by the laws of science, that is a more mature way of asking the foolish question, what shoe size is God? God makes people with feet of different sizes. That doesn't mean that God now is bound by that system. So looking for evidence for God from the scientific perspective is a little bit of a narrow-minded way of looking at it. There's a God the way he is within nature, but God is beyond nature. God is not bound by that system. But at the same time, God is the creator of the system. You know, here's a little joke that brings out the point. A team of scientists challenged God. We've discovered how to make man. You made man on the sixth day of creation. You made Adam. We've discovered how to make a man. So God said, you know what? Sounds very intriguing. Show me. Come make a demonstration. All right. So they all show up and they start pulling out bags of sand. They start pulling out bags of dirt because the Torah says that's how God created man, with dirt. So they start pulling out dirt. God says, hey, 1 second. Go get your own dirt. Even the dirt is God's. God is beyond the system. Everything we are discovering is God's system. And here's the most important point. And I think this is what Velvel Green meant. Bad religion and bad science don't go well. Good religion and good science don't go well. Bad religion and bad science don't go well because they see each other as enemies. The religious people look at science and see a threat. The scientists look at religion and say, this is stupid. And therefore, whatever anybody says is automatically not jiving well with the other one. It's literally competition, two opposite parties. The proper Jewish perspective is science is also God's. There's no conflict. It's all part of the same system. There's a God, he created the world, and we discover the world through science. Not only we could discover the world, it's our job to discover the world. When God created Adam and put him in the Garden of Eden, God said, I'm placing you in the Garden of Eden to work the land and to guard the land, to cultivate it. God said there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of potential. You have to be the one to develop that potential. Make medicine, make modern technology. The advancement of science is not a contradiction to God. It's the very opposite. It's developing God's world. It makes us appreciate God's world. It makes us realize the brilliance and just how infinitely great the world that God gave us is. So this whole idea of like looking at science and religion and God and science as two entities that are in perpetual conflict and never get along is very not Jewish. I think other religions suffer from that. That science is like an actual affront to their beliefs. And Judaism is really not like that. Science itself is Jewish also. It all fits within the same system. There's one God, he gave us a Torah, he created a world. What's the problem? It all goes together. Okay, here's a little story, an interview with Professor Velvel Green. We're gonna have to wrap up after this. We're starting to run out of time, but we'll do the video. And I think there's such a powerful line in here that I think brings home this attitude. So here we go.
Dr. Velvel Green is Professor Emeritus of Epidemiology and Public Health at Ben-Gurion University. He was an original participant in NASA's exobiology program searching for life on Mars and was Professor of Public Health and Microbiology at the University of Minnesota for 27 years.
The Rebbe asked me if it would be possible to read some of the work I was doing for NASA. As he pointed out very clearly, if it's not classified. So I said, yeah, I think there's many documents that I could send him which are open. And but I said to him, why should the Rebbe read this? It's most of it is all preliminary to going to Mars. We haven't been to Mars yet. We're just doing experiments to plan for the Martian trip. And what we're doing is this normal, actually, bacteriology that's not very exciting. Let me decide. So I promised him, and as you might believe, that several months went by and I didn't send him any. The next time I was in New York, actually I wasn't at the Yechidus, but I was in New York, and I was davening Mincha in 770 at the headquarters, and the Rebbe saw me in the room, and when the Mincha was over, he called me over. And he said, you promised me something. And, I said something aside, what did I forget? He said, you promised me the reports. So I said, I wasn't taking it seriously, because I didn't look at them. Well, I thought the Rebbe has so much to do. He's so busy. Why should he? So the Rebbe said something very important. He says, don't have pity on the Rebbe. Send the reports. So I went home and I took a pile of reports. 3 or 4 folders full, maybe, substantial, from different years of our work that was not classified, and sent it to the Rebbe. Most of these reports were on trying to simulate, trying to duplicate what we thought the Martian environment might be like, especially since we were getting more and more information back from flybys, not from landers. This was all in the 70s. The first landing made on Mars was 1976, July 1976. So this was work that was being done in the late 60s, early 70s, trying to develop a sampling device that would sample the dust on Mars and see if living microbes are present. So people like myself were in the job of saying, if this is a Martian atmosphere, what type of microbes might be there that we recognize so that we could provide the proper nutrients to grow them when we get there. It's complicated. That's what I did. But it was basically simple bacteriology. It didn't have to do with Mars. It had to do with some straight laboratory. I had a big group of microbiologists working for me in the laboratories, testing and generating mounds and mounds and mounds of paper, which we would send to NASA, which were reports. Until we actually landed on Mars, which was the essence, until we actually took samples, nothing we were doing had any relevance to anything. Okay, as it was. However, I had these mounds and mounds of papers, these documents I sent to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe thanked me very much. And as usually with his modest approach, I won't understand them. It's not my field, but I'm just interested in reading anyway. The next audience, the Yechidut that I had with, Gil and I had with the Rebbe, probably Purim, 1972, 73. We came back from a trip to London. And it was around that time. And the Rebbe said, we brought all our children. It was a very nice thing. The children there, I remember when the little girl was dancing on his table. And so the Rebbe said, just before leaving, there's something I'd like to bring up. Obviously, it's because I don't understand your work, but it seems to me that there's a disagreement. It's something you wrote in one place about whether bacteria like these would grow on Mars. And he mentioned a volume. He said, I'm not quite sure, but he's mentioned in this part of the report. And in another report that you wrote several years later, you describe the same experiment and you say they can't grow. They wouldn't grow on Mars. So I said, well, I don't remember. This time you learned that you don't ask her, you tell her, I don't remember. Well, I'll look it up. Next time I came home, I found these reports, dusty reports. I read them up, and of course, with a discrepancy. What I said here, I didn't say here. Why not? Because I forgot what I said the first time. What difference did it make? The report was, it didn't make any essential difference because, and it was really a typographical mistake. There's just one step, these can grow or can't grow, just apostrophe T. Came back to the Rebbe, the next Yechidus, which was a year later. This is a question. So I said, with regard to the discrepancy, the Rebbe was right. What I said here, I didn't say here, and it was simply because I made a mistake. And I hadn't read the first report when I read these, as I would have corrected it. He says, thank you, you make me feel better. I don't like contradictions in science. He used the word stiris. I don't like discrepancies, contradictions. He says, if the difference between what you said here and here is because you made a mistake, that makes me feel better. So Rebbe always asked for reports from me. In fact, one day in a moment of exasperation, I was in the Rebbe's office. I was Yechidus, and I was standing. By this time I was already not sitting. When I came with Gail, we sat, but I was standing. And the Rebbe says, you owe me a report. And I would be a little flippant, excuse me for saying so, but you want the truth. So I said to him, they say that the Rebbe has Ruach HaKodesh. The Rebbe has this divine insight to see things. So if the Rebbe has Ruach HaKodesh, why is he asking me for a report? Doesn't he know what's going on? I should, Hasidim would slap me. Rebbe didn't slap me. Rebbe smiled, and he said as follows in Yiddish. Because when we were having our audience together, the Rebbe always spoke to me in Yiddish. We spoke in Yiddish. But when Gil was there, he insisted we speak in English, so she would understand. So the Rebbe said in Yiddish, he says, "Was man sagt, soll man sagen." What they say, let them say. From you, I want a report. So this is a kind of personal thing that I'll never forget. I'll never forget.
Very colorful character. He's a very, very interesting guy. But I love that line what the Rebbe said. I don't like contradictions in science. So the Rebbe was, whatever we know about the Rebbe, about the Lubavitch Rebbe, was really only his second half of his life. He only became a public figure in 1950. He was born in 1902. He was a college graduate. He went to the Sorbonne. He learned in the University of Berlin. He was a scientist. The Rebbe was a scientist. The Rebbe studied under Schrodinger. The Rebbe said that he really enjoyed his lectures in Berlin under Schrodinger. In fact, when the Rebbe came to America, when he escaped Europe during the war, 1941, so the Rebbe was an engineer. That's what he graduated as an engineer, and he wanted to give back to America. So he got a job in the Brooklyn Navy Yard and became one of the engineers for the Navy. And he was assigned to developing the submarine of the United States Navy, of the Marine. And, in the Chabad world, we tried uncovering the Rebbe's work. The Rebbe worked there for many years. That was his day job. And the Rebbe's work is still classified because it's still in use. So, so it wasn't, so the United States Army submarines have engineering work from the Rebbe till today, as of they last checked. If it was out of date, then they would declassify the reports and we'd be able to see what the Rebbe was doing all those years. But that was the Rebbe's way to give back to the war effort. So the Rebbe really was a scientist, and he was coming. So the Rebbe was that big believer. Science and religion go well together. So he loved this idea. There shouldn't be discrepancies in science. You should see the unity. You should be able to see the fingerprints of God in science. And then you see it's not a contradiction, it's the opposite. Okay, we have 12 minutes left. 2 questions left. So let's hit it. Let's get moving. Question number 3, why is Judaism so obsessed with idolatry? Is God just jealous? Is God being jealous? Is God a jealous God? If you study through the Torah, you'll see idolatry and God telling us not to serve idols and all that stuff is a big, big, big thing. It's fair to say that the Torah is quite obsessed with idolatry. There's 613 commandments in the Torah. Right? In Judaism, there's 613 commandments, 613 mitzvahs. You know how many are about idolatry? 51. 51 out of 613 are commandments and prohibitions about idolatry. That's a lot. Idolatry is a massive topic in Judaism. Even look at the 10 commandments. What's the first commandment? I'm Lord your God. What's the second commandment? Don't you dare make another God. Don't make graven images. Don't use my name in vain. The question we're going to ask is, what is up with the obsession? Why is God so obsessed with idolatry? And we could say cynically, maybe God is jealous, scared of the competition. Okay, but
What does idolatry actually mean?
okay, so what does idolatry mean? Well, you're already kind of giving us the entryway to the answer. Well, simply speaking, what does idolatry mean? Back in the day, this is not a big thing anymore. People would serve idols, which meant this was like in vogue. This was like a thing. Today people have iPhones. That's exciting. People go and get a new phone and a new TV screen, more inches. Back then, you know what what was exciting? When the new idol was released. iPhone was being idols back then. That's why it starts with the I, idol. But then nobody cared for it anymore, so they just made iPhones. But back in the day, it was idols. Okay. So question number 1 is, what is up with the obsession with idols? Is God simply jealous? Question number 2 is, what actually is the significance of having only one God? One God, 2 gods. What's the big problem if there are 2 gods? Let there be one God. Let there be 2 gods. Just be one. Why is it so fundamental to Judaism? And number 3 is, how is this even relevant today? Back in the day, people were into idols. It was a big, big thing. And there had to be commandments against idols. Today, who's into idols? The competition used to be between 1 God and 20 gods. Today, the competition is between 1 God and 0 gods. Idolatry is not even the thing anymore. So is there a massive part of Judaism which is out of date? Is a second of the 10 commandments simply not really applicable anymore? Saying who today, their challenge in life is that I want to serve idols. I'm sorry, God, that's my challenge as a Jew. I love idols. I can't get out of it. It's like back in the day, people used to think that way. It's hard for us to imagine. So how is this whole thing about idols even relevant? So what I want to share with you, at least briefly, is that in fact, idolatry is more prevalent today than you would think. Idolatry is just as prevalent as it used to be, perhaps even more. Yeah, even today, 2022, in Detroit, in our lives, we still struggle with idolatry. But as Pam said, we have to understand what idolatry means. What does idolatry mean? Take a look at text 11. Take a look at text 11, page 187. The early sages taught getting angry is tantamount to idolatry. Hear this? This is a quote from Maimonides. Maimonides is quoting the Talmud. You get angry, that's like serving idols. That's harsh. First of all, getting angry, don't we all get angry? There's all things that get us angry. There's all things that ruin our day. That's okay. Like, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not okay, but it happens. It's like serving idols, one of the most severe prohibitions in the Torah. What's the connection? Getting mad at idols? You see, it's very, very simple. Very, very simple. What is serving idols? Serving idols simply means that you say, God, you're here. You know, when people served idols, they still believed in the one God. They also believed in other powers. So they say, okay, God, there's you, but then there's also other powers that I need to reckon with. I need to make sure I need to curry favor from other gods, from other powers. That's the essence of idol worship. Having one God and only one God means the belief there's only one power in your life. There's only one power. There's no force that has power in your life besides the one God. That is what believing in one God means. That's what monotheism means. Idolatry means, no, I have more than one force in my life. When you get mad, when you get angry, what are you essentially saying? Why do we get mad? We get mad because we were planning to do this. My life was okay with this. I had everything worked out. And then something or somebody or some circumstance messed up my life, messed up my day. And now I'm mad because of that. Something ruined my life. Supposed to go this way, now it went this way. That is a denial of God's absolute dominion and control in your life. That is saying there's another power in my life. There's another power that could change my destiny. That's idolatry. We all have things today, especially in America, right? Call it the American idol. Not as much anymore, but we idolize things. And we even sacrifice things to these idols. For some people, the power that they reckon with is money, making money. For other people, it's status. For other people, it's happiness. Happiness became an idol. I need to be happy. Why I need to be happy? I need to be happy. It's like a belief. It's like a leap of faith. I need to be happy for no good reason. Very religious, very fundamentalist. I need to be happy. And then that becomes a power that we reckon with. And then becomes there's a God. I believe in a God. And then God, I also got to make money. I'm sorry, there's another power here I have to reckon with. That is idolatry. It's not literal idolatry. It's not prostrating to a stone statue. But it has the ingredients of idolatry. You are denying the oneness of God. So if somebody says, you know what, God, I'd love to light Shabbos candles. I'd love to light the Hanukkah candles. But I work. Shabbos candle lighting in the winter, here in Detroit in the early weeks, these weeks, it's 4:40, 4:42. You have to light Shabbos candles. I can't do that, God. I'm sorry. I'd love to. I can't. If money and the mitzvahs in competition, that's idolatrous. You're saying there's more than one power. So this is what we're saying. Idolatry is everywhere. Getting angry is like idolatry. And this is what we're going to say over here. Anger is a denial of God and his absolute involvement in your life. That there's only God in your life. It puts the power into someone else's hands, which is essentially creating an idol. And this is what we're saying. This is why idolatry is so important in Judaism. Why is idolatry such a centerpiece in Judaism? It cuts to the heart of Judaism. What do we say? This is the question. Do I believe in God and his total control over this world? That's a Jewish belief. There's only one God, and he's the only one in control. It's up to us to give control to some other power, to some other person, and say, yeah, there's a God, and there's also somebody else in my life. What Judaism wants of us, what it means to believe in God, is not just to believe there's a big God out there. There's only one power. There's only one thing in control in my life. Nothing else could hurt me. Nothing else could help me. There's focus, singularities, singular purpose, oneness, purpose. And I have a good story. I'll tell you a quick little story. You ready? So my father-in-law and mother-in-law are the founders and the directors of the Friendship Circle. And they once hired a company to do some construction work. I don't know, they were doing some expansion at the campus, the Friendship Circle campus. So my father-in-law told me the story. So he hired a builder, a Jewish company, to do the construction. And he gave them the dates that they shouldn't be doing any work. They shouldn't come on Shabbos, they shouldn't come on a holiday. And he's walking to shul, and it's a holiday. It was like the high holiday season, so probably like Sukkot. He sees that they're there. The machines are there. The workers are there. 10 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. So he walks over to them. He says, "What's going on?" So the boss was there. He walks over and says, "What's going on over here? I thought we made up. I gave you the schedule. There's no work to be done on the holidays." The boss said, "Listen, I'm trying to help you out. Today's a day that I was able to maneuver things. I could get the job done today. The workers are here today. If we don't finish today, we got to move all the machinery. I got to do another job. I'm not going to be back here for 2 months. And it's going to end up costing you a lot more." And he told him how much money he's going to save by letting work happen today. He says, "Isn't there like some way we can make this work? It's not a big deal. A holiday, you're not doing it. The workers aren't Jewish." So my father-in-law said like this. He says, "The exact same God that wants me to run the Friendship Circle is a God who tells me, don't do work on a holiday." It's the same God. There's no competition. What should I do? The God that wants me to do this, I should tell him, "No, I'm going to do it when you don't want me to do it." It makes no sense. It's the same God. He says, "I'm sorry. I'm going to have to pay whatever extra tens of thousands of dollars it's going to be. I can't have you working today." So this Jewish guy looks at my father-in-law in disbelief and says, "Your life is so simple. Your life is so easy. That's such an easy decision to make. There's no struggle. There's no tension. It's the same God. So it's a very easy answer." That's what Judaism wants of us, to have that simplicity, to have a truth that we could live by. There's only one God. That one God wants us to do mitzvahs. That same God wants us to work. That same God wants us to make money. It all fits into one context. And this is why idolatry is so important. Let's do the last question very quickly. All right, okay. Why is Judaism so obsessed with idolatry? Is God jealous? And we answer that placing one's trust in anything other than God's absolute control is the essence of idolatry. And that's very important to the Jewish belief system of a Jew, to the attitude that Judaism wants us to have. Yes?
Although it does say in the Bible that God is jealous.
Oh, what does jealous mean? And is that even the proper translation of the word? God is mekana. Okay. Okay, not for now. Does jealous mean jealous? Is jealous the actual translation of that word? Okay, final question for today. I am spiritual, not religious. Why do I need to follow the Torah system to have a relationship with God? And in fact, you could use something that I said 2 weeks ago against me. I came here and I pounded on the table and said, Judaism is not a religion. We don't like religion. Religion is treif. Judaism is a relationship between a Jew and God. We don't believe in religion. We don't believe in systems. So if so, why is Judaism a whole system? Why do I need to connect to God through mitzvahs, through a system? I have a guy, I know a guy, a very, very smart guy. He learns with me. And learning, he'll learn with me. He doesn't care to, and he usually doesn't agree to ever do a mitzvah with me. Would you like to put on tefillin? Nah. Very disinterested. And I asked him, why not? You appreciate Judaism, you appreciate God. Why do you want to do a mitzvah? He told me something very interesting. He says, mitzvahs are for people that don't know how to make a relationship with God. So we give them things to do. Do this and do that, and you feel good about yourself, you feel connected. Me, I'm a sophisticated guy. I don't need mitzvahs. I figured it out how to make a real deep relationship with God. I'm spiritual. I think, I meditate. I don't need mitzvahs. Interesting perspective. So why indeed do we need it? What does that mean that we connect to God through the mitzvahs that God gives us? One quick look in the Torah answers the question. We began this course talking about Abraham, our forefather, right? How he smashed the idols in his father's shop. His father opened up a shop called Idols Are Us. He was the original, Idols Are Us. Okay. Abraham, if you look at the Midrash, at the teachings of our sages, at the oral tradition of our people, Abraham was a very, very impressive fellow. And he has a wonderful life story. It starts at 5 years old when he first perceives God. And when he begins this life of activism, he goes on and he's influencing people. He becomes this radical leader, trying to get people to believe in one God. He goes against the grain. He fights against the whole world. He goes up against the greatest powers of the day. There's a whole wonderful drama of the showdown between the greatest king of the time, King Nimrod, and Abraham. Wonderful story. Abraham gives up his life for God. He's successful. He's really a figure we should be proud of. A wonderful life story. But if you look in the Torah, where does Abraham's story begin in the Torah? The first time you start hearing about Abraham is this verse, which is on page 193. In Genesis, this is the very first time you read anything about Abraham's life story. God said to Abraham, this is text 14a, God said to Abraham, go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. God tells Abraham, get going. I want you to travel somewhere. The Torah tells us, how old is Abraham at this point? 75 years old. He's not young anymore. He's old. I'm not saying that 75 is old. Nobody throw eggs at me. 75 is young. 75 is the new 65, right? That's what they say. 65 is the new 55. But it's astonishing. It's really weird. It's bizarre. The Torah ignores Abraham's backstory. If you would simply open up the Torah, open up the Bible, what you would see is, we don't know anything about this guy. Nothing to be impressed about. Meanwhile, this guy is literally the man. He's the man. He's been doing amazing things for the past, decades and decades of his life. The Torah just stays silent on it all. Nothing. Nothing at all. And begins here. What's the significance of his life story in the Torah officially beginning here? The difference is that until this point, his relationship with God was a relationship that he was doing everything. He initiated the relationship. He committed himself just because he decided to commit himself. This verse, 75 years old, was the first time that Abraham spoke directly to Abraham, that God spoke to Abraham and commanded him something. The first time that God responded and initiated in the relationship is this verse. Oh, if you want to understand what it means to have a relationship with God, this is the model. Let's read text 14b. Marion, would you like to read? 14b on page 193, our final text for today.
The Torah emphasizes at the very beginning of the Jewish story in the narrative of Abraham, what makes a Jew unique. Abraham's uniqueness as a Jew and his elevated stature do not begin with his extraordinary qualities, with the closeness to God that he achieved through his own toil and efforts, but rather with God said to Abraham, go forth. It begins with God setting Abraham apart. Abraham's relationship with and attachment to God was established through God commanding him and his fulfillment of that command.
Judaism and your relationship with God is unique. It's not because you are developing a relationship with God. No. What it means to be a Jew is that God is making a relationship with you. And in this sense, Judaism is not a religion. Anything about any other religion doesn't apply to Judaism. It's fascinating. What's religion all about? What's religious life all about? It's always all about how you need God. You need God. Why do you need God? Because if not, you'll go to hell. All right. Or you could go to heaven if you believe in God. Or you could have a very, very meaningful life if you believe in God, if you connect to God. Religion is all about you doing stuff. It's all about you. What could I get out of God? Why do I need God? And then what do I get out of God? How can I make my life better from God? In a certain way, religion is very narcissistic. So self-obsessive. It's all about me and what can I get out of it and what do I need to do? And I need God. It's a lot about you. That was Abram's life for the first 75 years of his life. It was him building a relationship with God. And then at the age of 75, God flips the table. Says, Abram, let's rewrite the narrative. I need something from you. Can you do it? You hear this? It's not man saying, God, I need you. All right, most religions say God doesn't need you, you need God. What does Judaism say? What's the starting point of the Jewish relationship with God? It's not the Jew coming and saying, what can I get out of you, God? It's God turning to the Jew, saying, Abraham, I have a mission for you. Can you please do it? I have a dream, I have a vision. Can you be a part of it? What was the moment that made the Jewish people into the Jewish people? Who spoke first? Who initiated in the relationship? Us or God? It was God. God showed up at Mount Sinai and said, I am the Lord your God. And God spoke in the singular form, not the plural. God spoke to you and said, I'm your God. I took you out of Egypt. I need you. God made himself vulnerable. God says, I need you. I created you. I created you where you are in your circumstances, with your strengths, with your weaknesses. I need you. Only you. Judaism is not about us. It's about us living a higher purpose. Judaism is really about God asking us to be in a relationship with him, to be business partners with him. Every other religion is all about what a person could get out of the religion. Judaism is, which is very humbling, that God needs us. Which on the one hand, you could feel is, okay, so then what do I get out of it? On the other hand, that's so humbling, so empowering. God needs you. You know why you're alive today? Not because of what you could get out of God, because God needs you. A mitzvah is our way of entering into that relationship. It's not my relationship on my terms. What could I get out of God? What good life could I build because I know God or because I do things for God? No. A mitzvah is our way of being in a relationship, in a real relationship with God, which was initiated with God. This way, if relationship with God was all about what we do, then there would be one Jew who's a better Jew and one Jew who's a worse Jew. One Jew has a better relationship with God. One Jew has a worse relationship with God. Look, this Jew is doing a better job making a relationship. This other Jew, a nechtik and tug. He's not doing anything to make his relationship with God. He has no relationship. What does Judaism say? No. Your relationship is not because of what you are doing or not doing. Your relationship is because God made the relationship. God's speaking to you. I need you. I want you. There's something you could do, and only you could do. Every Jew's in the relationship. Every Jew is there. And your circumstances that you may think are not helping your relationship are actually part of the relationship. It's part of why you're needed. This is part of living a life that really matters, living a life of meaning. It's not about you. You have to get rid of that model. Stop thinking about what you could get out of God. And start thinking about, what am I living for? Why am I here? What's my purpose? And dear friends, with that, we conclude this course. I want to share with you two short stories. Two short stories, all right? There was a great rabbi, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, really famous guy. His name was Rabbi Meir Shapiro. Meir Shapiro made a yeshiva, which was a very well-known yeshiva. It was called Chachmei Lublin, the scholars of Lublin. He was a wealthy man. He married into money, if I'm not mistaken. And he was able to support the yeshiva, no problem. No one had to fundraise for the yeshiva. To make a long story short, he lost all the money. And in order to keep the yeshiva afloat, he had to start traveling around and fundraising. And he even made some trips to America to go from city to city, to go to the big cities, to go to Boston, go to Chicago, and and he makes some money. So he went to one city. What he would do is he would go to the city and ask to give a speech, to give like a drasha, to give like a shir, to teach a little bit of a Talmudic exploration to the community, and then he would get some donations afterwards. So he's in one community. He does his spiel. He gives his class. And afterwards, all the people who think they're smart come over to him and ask him questions and debate him and this and that. And there's one Jew in this one city that he's going to who's waiting online to speak to Rabbi Shapiro, but he's waiting until he wants, he's letting everybody go in front of him. He wants to speak to Rabbi Shapiro last. So after a very long time, everybody is sitting there and taking up the rabbi's time, hours and hours. Finally, this one Jew comes over. He says, Rabbi Shapiro, I must share with you, I'm a very simple Jew. I didn't understand anything you said today. But at least I want to give you a little donation for your yeshiva. So here, please accept this check. So Rabbi Shapiro says, you don't understand. You are the only person who understood what I was saying today. They all thought I'm here. You think I traveled from Poland to come and give a class in St. Louis? I'm here for... Okay, no, don't misunderstand the story. I don't mean to say that you should all give a donation to Chabad before the end of the year. No, that's good also, but that's not what I mean. Sometimes you could get the point, sometimes you miss the point. My hope is, my blessing to all of you is that this study that we've just done together for 6 weeks, 9 hours, 25 questions about God, shouldn't just be one of intellectual curiosity, interesting philosophy, that we should get the point. That what we've been learning should touch us, make us into better people, make us appreciate our relationship with God more. And the main point is to encourage us to do another mitzvah, to feel the energy to make a deeper commitment, and to appreciate our relationship with God. And one last story. There was a Hasidic Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, the Kotsker Rebbe. Very interesting character if you ever read up about him in Jewish history. He didn't accept no garbage. He was a sharpshooter. He was a very sharp guy. And he demanded truth, sincerity. In Yiddish, it's called Ehrlichkeit. Any of you know a little bit of Yiddish? Ehrlichkeit means real sincerity. He didn't like any garbage, any fake. It says once a young boy who showed up to his yeshiva in Kotsk. He said, I want to join the yeshiva. So the Rebbe calls him into his office. He says, why do you want to come to Kotsk to learn in my yeshiva? So this young boy says, I want to learn about God. So the Kotsker Rebbe says, God, you came here to learn about God? God is everywhere. Go back home. You can find God at home too. You have to come all the way to Kotsk. This young boy was very confused. He says, you have a whole yeshiva over here. What are they here for if not for God? So the Rebbe says, oh, them, why they're here? They're not here to find God. They're here to find themselves. We're here to find themselves. And that's the real point, right? We're not just here to learn about God as a subject matter. Really, the reason why we learn everything in Yiddishkeit, everything we learn in Judaism, the reason why we learn Torah, especially when we learn about God, it's really just learn about ourselves. So I want to bless you all as we conclude that this course should hit its mark. We should get the point. It's all about ourselves, becoming a better person, appreciating who we are. And I especially want to thank our course sponsors who have made this course possible. We want to remain anonymous, and we're going to respect that, but we thank them tremendously. And we have a new course starting right after the New Year's. Onward, better and higher, and even more learning, more joyous learning, and good opportunities, and good health. As we say in Yiddish, Gesundheit und Fröhlichkeit, with health and with joy. I wish you all a wonderful night, a beautiful Hanukkah filled with light and filled with joy. And I look forward to seeing you all soon in many more happy and healthy occasions. For more studying, for more friendship, may God bless you all. Have a good night.